So my name is Leslie Stone. I am the co-facilitator with the Act Now Coalition. So we're going to have two different panels talking to you today about the coalition. First, I'm going to go through a quick PowerPoint about coalitions in general. And Ricky is going to pass out a handout. And we'll talk a little bit more about it going forward, but it's called a network scorecard. So when you get that, hang on to it, and that'll kind of help you listen for some elements of a coalition. So you see this diagram up here. The Act Now Coalition was founded under this North Star goal, which you'll see in gold on the left. So that's the purpose of Act Now. It's a just transition from coal that establishes West Virginia as the global leader in climate resilience. That was driven by a funding opportunity, but it was something that all the members bought into. And these colorful wiggly lines that you see at the bottom are our strategic threads. And what we do in our quarterly meetings is define those together and then bring in experts, which are members of the coalition, to talk about what each of those things means. And then we explore together concepts and application. How do we weave those threads through our work together? So the definition of a network is multiple organizations working toward a common goal. There are different types of networks, and their complexity differs. And I just was able to tell Stephanie, I think I told Brandon the other day, that I've been working on coalition and network building for a little over 25 years. And the Act Now Coalition is the most tightly knit and effective coalition I have ever seen in my years of studying and working to help build coalitions. So you're going to get a rare treat by meeting the people that represent all the people in the network. It's all about relationships, and relationships are all about trust. So the idea of following through, doing what you're saying, connecting people to each other, that's what really makes the difference in a network. So there are different types of networks, and it starts, the whole thing may not fit on here, but cooperating networks are basically information sharing. So maybe I'll tell you what's on my calendar, you'll tell me what's on mine, we'll not schedule over each other, we might hand out brochures to each other. It's a great way to start because you begin to network and attach people to each other, make introductions, be friendly, kind of show each other who you are and what you do. So the rest of that slide that you can't see, there are coordinating networks. So maybe a group of agencies and organizations might come together to advocate for a particular policy. There is no director in these things. There's no board. It's a shared leadership model, and it's not directive leadership. It's not somebody standing up there telling people what to do. It is shared leadership. We make decisions together. We invite each other in to lead various aspects. And you'll hear from the founders how that came together. And then the last one is really about the collaborative network, which is the example you're going to see in the Act Now Coalition. So you can imagine that when you're just coordinating, there's not a very high level of risk, and there's not a real high level of reward. Maybe you just don't overschedule on top of each other. But the farther along you go, the higher the risk and the higher the reward. So you're actually giving up something of value for the greater good, and others are doing the same in a collaborative network. So there are stages of development, and in the beginning, people just kind of feel out what's our capacity, as individual members, and what are our expectations of each other? What could this or it be? We don't know yet. We're just figuring it out. Then as it launches, there's a common vision, a purpose that everybody agrees on, and a plan. So that's how things kind of launch, and you'll hear that story. And then in the organizing, everybody starts out following this plan and go, oh, that strategy's not working. Let's try this. We make adjustments, and we move together to organize and see how we're going to be together. And you'll hear some stories about where we had stumble spots and we went in to help each other figure that out. Then in the performing and adapting part is where people really start rolling. Things are getting implemented, and we're changing based on what we're learning. And metrics is a big part of that, investing in the sustainability, and you'll hear about that, and investing in collecting the information and everybody reviewing that together and see, well, what's that telling us? How are we going to move forward? So what you have in front of you is called a network scorecard, and it measures the health of a network. So you'll see various things to pay attention to. You heard what the network, what the Act Now Coalition's network purpose is. It's their North Star goal. Then value propositions. What are the benefits to being in this network? And what do I need to give or contribute to be a member or a participant? The facilitated leadership, not directive. Governance, there is no board, there is no executive director, but there is a memorandum of understanding or memoranda of understandings. So we know what we expect from each other, how decisions are made. We decide that together. And that can get long and painful. They'll tell you about that, getting it worked out. Then network health. How well are we doing? How are we feeling about being with each other? Again, back to the relationships and the trust. How connected are we? And I'll show you a slide here in a second. And then what's our sustainability like? Do we have the funding to get our work done? And how do we grow more? And again, Act Now is very good at that. So this is just a picture. Oh, look at that T hanging out there. This is actually a picture of network development. So on the top left is a 2009, then 2010, 2011, and 2012. And you see if dots represent people or organizations and the lines represent connections, you see how you can deliberately grow your connections so that you end up looking like a spider web, because you're always introducing yourselves to someone else and making connections so that people's gifts are shared and the growth intentionally occurs. So despite the dangling T, so some key takeaways when you're thinking about building a network is that it's all about the trust and the relationships. It's about honesty and integrity. And we've got a room full of that. That's what builds a successful network. People follow through, leadership is shared, risks and rewards increase. And then there are ways to measure network health and network connectivity. There's a whole science around the analysis of networks and how to grow them. So there are tools out there available. When you see this at the end, these sources include some of those sources to measure network development. So keep that scorecard handy. And just take a second while we bring our first panelist up to familiarize yourself with some of these components and then listen for those elements throughout the conversation. Brandon, Stephanie, Alex, come on up.
All right, there's two parts to this, so I'm going to set a timer because we don't want to dominate the time on ourselves here. So if I'm looking down at my phone, I'm checking the timer. So my name's Brandon. When the U.S. Economic Development created this program, they wanted each coalition, they explicitly wanted this to be coalitions. So Build Back Better Regional Challenge was not for one organization. It was for coalitions of organizations to come together around a key economic sector. And so we chose climate technology. So Act Now stands for Appalachian Climate Technology Coalition, Act Now Coalition. And that was counterintuitive to some. Some said, well, this is a fossil fuel community. How would a fossil fuel community be the world leader in climate technology? And we said, well, we think we have some hidden comparative advantages that might get overlooked. And with some investment and some R&D could really become major sustainable generators for the new West Virginia economy, the new Appalachian economy. And as Leslie said, that's the North Star that we really came together around. But many of us had already been collaborating for many years. And so the three of us, there were many people involved in the early days of these discussions. The stage would be more than full. So we wanted to just give about 20 minutes of how did this come to be and what do we learn from that? And then we want to bring up sort of new generation of leadership who's implementing this project to say, how does this keep going? And what does collaboration look like on a day-to-day basis? Like I said this morning, it's a buzzword. Everybody talks about collaboration, but it's an easier said than done concept. And so I hope you find a lot of value in this discussion. So And just a little bit more background. It was a national competition for these coalitions, U.S. Economic Development Administration. There were 529 original applicants nationwide. There were 60 finalists. Act Now is one of the finalists. And there were 21 winners nationwide. And we were one of the 21 winners. And we actually got the third largest award in the country, $62.8 million of federal funds. We raised nearly an additional $30 million in matching funds. So certainly for me in my career, almost makes me faint the jump up, that it took to go from where we had been to where we are now financially. It's 8 different projects spread against nearly 30 other grantees. So that was not a big grant to one organization. That is spread across a coalition. Nearly 30 grantees funded, and then an additional 16 communities and other sub-grantees and partners, nearly 100 that are engaged in the projects in some shape, form, or fashion. So that's the background and the context. Stephanie, maybe I'll start with you. Do you remember the first time you heard about this Build Back Better regional challenge?
Yeah. So I think I remember it well. I think it was a phone call from you, Brandon, and you were reaching out to see if the Hub and Coalfield could talk about it. You were sort of thinking about some different ideas to approach the proposal. The Hub was not looking at it at all. It was way beyond the scope of funding we had ever gone for before. And we had never been successful at getting EDA funding because they really needed to see jobs created in their programs that they funded. And the Hub does capacity building and leadership development and project development. It's not about jobs that are immediately created through our programs. So I wasn't even looking at it. But we ended up having an in-person meeting, and I remember this. I remember exactly where it was and when it was. It was around this time of year, and I basically told Brandon, "I don't think this is going to work." But
I believe the quote was, "We've put a lot of time into this. And it would be really bad for that to be." That was later.
That was a year later. Okay. Yeah. That was when I was like, "We better get this," because of how much time we put into it. But what I want to say about now is that I kept thinking about it, and we kept talking about it, even though I was initially a little critical about the idea. Or I couldn't really see how it would work because we had a really strong relationship between our organizations and just as leaders. And the work of community economic development in West Virginia can get very siloed in different sectors. So the types of programs the Hub was running didn't always overlap with the types of programs that Coalfield and Generation were running, but there were these different threads that connected us together. And so some of the very first things that I worked on at the Hub a dozen years ago was creating the Abandoned Properties Coalition with Coalfield. That was a policy initiative to deal with dilapidated properties, but that was where the trust started to be built between our organizations. Generation West Virginia and the Hub shared office space for years. And we did like a lot of kind of just like getting lunch together and building our relationship as people and kind of learning about each other's programs and helping each other build our programs. So there was this really unique foundation of just deep relationship connection between the organizations. And that for me created the space to be able to think creatively about how could we build something together that could work for this program. And it kept me open to new ideas and not feeling like I was just getting slotted into a grant so you could check off some box that you needed to on the grant. There was a deeper relationship there.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say when there's a big announcement like this, there's a lot of jockeying is probably a fair. I mean, there's a lot of organizations that want to see that funding as they should, and so I think in addition to just these three organizations, lots of organizations had to have very trusting and sometimes brave conversations. Show your cards a little bit. Here's what we think is a right strategy. Here's who we think fits into that. Here's who might not fit into that as well, and just be very honest and candid. And hours before a word of a grant application got written, phone calls, in person, just trying to look at all the different variables and see how all the different groups fit into that. And we maintain, there were hurt feelings along the way, but I think by and large, the trust and relationships held strong through that jockeying process, which is a testament to people outlive projects. Other thoughts on that?
Just one other thing about the kind of history. So what was also unique about the collaboration was Brandon really brought us all together, and you set a table where you said, I want to support what you're already doing. We got to fit into a certain box for this program like you do for every grant that you apply for. But I'm not trying to get everyone to make something new or to fit into Coalfield's box. We really talked about it as we have capacity that we've built in the field in West Virginia. How can we use this funding opportunity to catapult us to the next level? And setting a very big table to bring a lot of organizations there and say, we see your work, we see the value of your work, we know you need more resources, let's do it. And we know Southern West Virginia needs more resources, so we're going to focus on this area.
And the table's meant to expand. So the Hub and CBR Community Business Resilience Initiative have 16 communities throughout Southern West Virginia in the Accelerate program, and many representatives of those 16 communities are here. So great point. So Alex, do you remember the first time you heard about Build Back Better Regional Challenge or Act Now Coalition?
Yes.
You have a very interesting story.
So I was the director of a nonprofit in Wheeling when I got the job at Generation West Virginia. And so I was kind of, wrapping some things up there and also working part-time at Generation West Virginia to kind of onboard with my predecessor, Natalie Roper. And she said, look, I've been talking to Coalfield and Brandon Dennison about this grant that they're interested in that we might be a part of. I don't know if you think it's a good idea, if you want to chat with them. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I knew who Coalfield was. I knew Brandon. I of course knew Stephanie. But talk about like a free fall of I was like, I think I can trust these people, right? Like you just go into it and you're like, I believe what they're saying, right? This is really community like driven. And really like a thoughtful process. And so it was a sink or swim moment, I think. I had a lot of conversations with my board of, if we do this, it would really transform our organization if it worked out. But truly, if it didn't work out, I thought this was such a unique opportunity to build like incredible partnerships, right? Like they existed in a way already, but there's such a level of trust and partnership that happened in this process that it would have taken years otherwise to do something like this. So we were like, yeah, we're interested. Let's learn more. And I remember we were asked, the Benedum Foundation got a bunch of us together with the Richmond Federal Reserve in Charleston to talk really about community investment and some other things, rural investment. And there was a conversation around this proposal. And, is anyone in West Virginia considering this? And again, I'm not even full-time in my role yet, right? And I'm sitting there in between Brandon and some stakeholders from the state of West Virginia. And Brandon said, yeah, I think a coalition of nonprofits are considering applying, and the state said, well, so are we. And there was a moment of, how do we navigate this as partners in a way that does not feel adversarial or territorial. And I think, Brandon did that so well. And, now looking back, we were successful in the process. And not only did it not feel super competitive with the state, it actually now has created really important partnerships with the state of West Virginia, and they collaborate with our project really strongly. So you talk about trust and relationship building, like that is the core of how this moved and how it's been working.
Yeah, that's a memory.
Yeah, yes.
One thing that was very unique about our coalition compared to some other coalitions, all the coalitions had nonprofit organizations involved in them. Ours was like nonprofit led, like the core of the leadership team was from nonprofit community-based organizations. And really, I think the federal government was very nervous about that. They felt like, how could these groups possibly have the capacity to manage this much money effectively? And our pushback was, well, actually, how could we not have that? If the point is to get the money to communities that have not been getting this money before, then shouldn't we look to community leadership to get that done. But that's a bit of a paradigm shift. Stephanie, could you speak to how we've held together since then? I think you actually went back and counted like the amount of time it took just to secure the funds, and then the amount of time it takes to follow through on what we said we would do.
I counted just for myself.
One person in the coalition.
Yeah. So this was a year-long grant writing process. So this is the program, Act Now Coalition's program started at the end of 2022. We're 2 years in now. This whole thing started actually at the end of 2020 was when we had that first meeting with your team and my team. And then it was all of 2021 that we worked on. And it was almost a full-time job to manage this program. How does it take that long to manage putting together one grant? Well, when the federal agency keeps changing the requirements or the templates they send you are wrong and you only realize that after you've completed them, so there was just a lot of minutia that we had to work through in terms of the actual putting the information together for the grant proposal. There was fundraising that we had to do because we had to secure matching funds and bring those to the table. So that includes relationships, but also putting in multiple other proposals. And then there was just all of this relationship building. And we started meeting as a coalition before we even got the award. And we created the MOU, which Leslie referenced, and we all signed that without an award because we wanted to show we are organized, we understand how to collaborate, and this is how we lead in our region, and we do have the capacity to do this work. So I don't remember the exact number, Brandon. I think it was, 50,000 100 hours, something like that. But it was a lot of work. And I did definitely get to the point in the summer. I think there's, this long period after we had applied. Then we had to change. I'm sure you'll get us to that story. And sort of resubmit. And then there was a period of waiting. And we knew how competitive it was. We knew that we were more than likely not going to get it. And I was like, if we don't get it, I will burn this place down. Because we have
You called to tell me that. It was important that I know.
But when you called and told me that we got the award, I started crying. I was so overwhelmed, proud of us, excited, and just felt like such a responsibility to execute what we'd promised and to kind of follow through with the commitments that we've made.
How about you, Alex? How many hours would you guess?
50,000 100. Is that what you said? Yeah, it was remarkably hard.
Right.
When you think about everything Stephanie said around the fundraising and the project development, not only was there trust to be built between all of us, but then how many people, how many organizations? 30
so
at
nearly
least.
30 are funded, and then there's 6 different foundations have matching funds into them, and then
So you're developing 8 distinct projects.
By the way, we got Marshall and WVU, our partners on this. Huntington and Charleston, our partner. I mean, traditional lifelong rivals.
That's right.
Coming together for this.
Yeah, and organizations that do similar work had to then within each of these 8 projects figure out how do we do complementary work and work that supports each other, and how do you build that together, and then how do you build this project so it also supports the other 7 projects? Just the these threads, to untangle them took a really long time.
High risk, high reward. I really connect with that. One last point before we transition. There was a key moment where this thing could have really fallen apart. After all of this work, we were very near, we were past the finalist stage, and we have this call with the EDA, and they sort of lay out, here's how much funding there is for the program. Here's how much all of you finalists have applied for, and it's 3 times as much as the total program that have been allocated. And basically the message was, if you don't cut your budget, we're going to cut your budget for you. And it's going to reflect on you as a coalition how you handle this. And how do you all remember that going from there?
I was on that call and you were on that call. And I texted you and I said, what did he just say? What did Scott just say? What
does this mean?
Right? Did you hear that? I heard it because he kind of just said it. And then he like went to something else. So we're like, what? And yeah, I mean, that could have been, I remember thinking like, we brought all these people together. First of all, it's math, EDA, right? Like you have X number of dollars and X number of people, and you could apply for up to $100 million. How much money do you think people are going to apply for? Like probably that, right? Probably the high mark. And so, right. And so, of course there wasn't enough money, we're like, well, come on guys. And so it was on us to really cut the budgets. And I remember thinking, geez, it felt so awful to have to tell partners, hey, we have to figure out a way, to cut budgets and cut outcomes, less than cut budgets. And, it broke my heart a little bit because I thought there were people that they weren't getting a lot of money already in this project. And I thought, geez, if we would have known this ahead of time, we might not have built such a robust coalition because there wasn't enough money to go around with what was left. But, we did it, right? We were able to do it. Like Benedum, JTF, a bunch of organizations really supported us in navigating this challenge that none of us saw coming. And the match commitments didn't change, which was huge. And there were times that it felt tense, but it never felt to me like it was off the rails, that like this, we can't resurrect this. Like I always felt like everyone understood that we were put up to a challenge that was not of our doing and we were going to drive through it. And it was really cool to see. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really a model of how do you respond to like an unexpected chaotic moment, that how you show up in that moment affects how other people show up, and how you respond affects the success of the project. And so this could have been something, so Scott is the EDA person. He just sort of mentions it in passing on the call. It could have been something that Brandon just emailed out to everyone and said, okay, guys, sorry to say this, but you got to cut your budgets, figure it out. Or he could have told us, Brandon was really the lead on this project. He could have said, here's what I need you to cut. And we're going to have to do this for me, please. But that wasn't the way it was approached. Brandon, you called me and you were very intentional in the way you talked to me about it. And you said, this is really hard. And this is not something that we expected, but we're going to have to cut our budgets. Here's what Coalfield's cutting. We're going to cut this piece out. We're going to cut that piece out. And we're going to take the biggest cut. And I need you to get your project partners together in your one project and work through a cut. And I'm asking all of the groups to cut this percentage. But you could have said, okay, we have 8 projects. We need to cut so much. I'm just going to cut out one of the programs. And I actually felt like the Hubs program could have been the easiest to be cut because it was the one that made the least sense to EDA. They just don't really get why capacity building matters. And it was the thread that ran through all of the communication about the program. And I really appreciate that from the partners that was saying, in order for us to do the economic development work, we have to invest in the local communities and the capacity building. And this is what roots us in the place long term. The program as a whole, the coalition doesn't work without the Community and Business Resilience Initiative. So ours is capacity building, but it's also business development and brownfields remediation. It's a bunch of stuff, but it's very place-based. Anyway, when you called me, I was like, okay, maybe he's just going to cut me out totally. And I sort of was quickly mentally preparing myself for that. And it felt like you sort of knew, and you were like, we're not cutting any programs. Everybody matters, but we need to figure out how to do a haircut ourselves. But I'm going to lead it up to you as the project lead to figure that out. And so then I called all of my partners. I didn't send an email. I was like, the relationship really matters, and this is going to be a difficult thing to deliver, and how you deliver it matters. So it was like it trickled down from the top, but I feel like in some ways it made our coalition stronger because before we even started, we had a moment where we could have broken and we got stronger because of it. And it also kind of gave us, EDA, why'd you do this to us? So brought us together.
Nothing like a shared, yeah. Well, That gave me chills. I think that's true. I mean, it really could have all fallen apart. Instead, we got stronger. So thank you both for your leadership and your partnership. Thank you to everyone involved in the Act Now Coalition. Bill is here with the Benedum Foundation. Sticking with us was a key moment. There's Bill. Thank you. And so now what I'm most proud of, I'm proud of how we came together. I'm more proud of how we've stayed together and the impact has grown. And we are doing what we said we would do. We've got a board up here, more than 600 people trained, more than 300 jobs, support provided to more than 70 businesses, nearly $1 billion of new investment being leveraged into this region. It's mind-boggling, and it's because of the collective impact. We're so much stronger together than we are apart. And so what we want to do now, there's a whole new generation of leadership. We're sort of becoming old timers. Alex, maybe, I won't put that on you. But and so we wanted to bring up the folks who make this happen day in and day out and really talk to the nuts and bolts and mechanics of collaboration. So let's shift to that.
So, new panel come up. And just so you have in the back of your mind, there are 4 construction projects and 4 non-construction projects. And this group up here represents 5 of the 8. Thank you for agreeing to do with this. Some of you, knew you agreed, but then it was just only moments before that you found out it was now. So thank you very much. So I'm going to ask that each person introduce themselves and answer this question as you come along. So what has made the Act Now Coalition work for you? In other words, why do you keep coming back? What's making it work for you? So Cody, you want to kick us off? Tell us who you are and where you're from.
I'm Cody Lynch. I'm the Director of Renewable Energy at Coalfield Development. So a lot of what we do is a lot of the workforce development, keeping our eye on what's going on with the renewables in the state and Appalachia. What's really made this work, we all kind of have that North Star goal, right? We're all kind of working towards the same thing, but this keeps us out of our silos. This has just been such a good resource because now we're reaching across organizations. We're all landing ourselves in committees together, working groups, clean energy working groups. We've got thought partners, and we're able to get market research studies that are really accurate out of these groups. The other one of that too is the educational system's moving towards community colleges are now wanting to get involved in learning about these new technologies and this new workforce. And on the workforce too, just sharing the trainings and job opportunities through the coalition. Just having that megaphone when we have a training going, knowing that we can rely on the Act Now Coalition to put that out there to their people too.
Thank you, Cody. Drew?
Hi, I'm Drew Dunlap. I'm with the Charleston Area Alliance, and our project is the Charleston Lift Center. Basically, what we're doing is rehabbing an old industrial facility on the east end of Charleston into a multi-tenant facility that's going to have a food hub, some workforce training, and Marshall University's Green Battery Institute. We're also going to have about 20,000 square feet of space that we can market. And I think probably one of the best things I get out of the coalition is the camaraderie with the other construction projects. I'm not sure if there's any others here today, but we have every other week we have a construction projects call, and we get it's really great for me because we get technical support. We're all at different stages of our projects. We can share data about how we're doing, how we're advertising for bids, what happens when you discover a tank that no one knew about buried on your property. Like, what do you do? And the answer is you just kick dirt over it. That's it. But also, and I say this like kind of jokingly, but also just emotional support. This stuff gets overwhelming sometimes. And it really feels good when someone else says, yeah, this really sucks today. Like, this part of it really is hard. But you know what? It got better, and this is how we addressed it. And so I don't know. I really appreciate that part of it, I think.
Testing. Okay. My name is Josiah Hanna. I work for Coalfield Development Corporation as a Community Impact Director. And our focus, my team's focus and part of the project is the workforce part. A lot of different ways of meeting that, a lot of different ways of training people. And came into this work for about 3/4 of a year, half of a year now, been involved. And when I was thinking about this question of what makes this work for you specifically, I really thought about you. So I'm glad you're sitting here next to me. There's somebody said today, repeated a quote of, I think it was Leslie Schaller, who they attributed the quote to, who's part of the CAN network, Central Appalachian Network, that collaboration moves at the speed of trust. And even jumping in midway, it's like I couldn't bypass that. There's systems and structures I could familiarize myself and kind of get on the same page and figure out, okay, what are we doing? What are the metrics? What's my job? But deep work like that still couldn't violate those laws of trust. And so the first moment that I really felt like this is working was Brianna, had this sort of peripheral almost seeming thing of, here's this person in Wyoming County, and I really think they need support. I really think they need people to listen to what they have to say. And is there anybody that would do that? Is there anybody in a position to do that? Not in an accusatory way, not in a like bang the fist down and be like, somebody get down there and listen to this person, but just an invitation and a call to action there. And it's like that, that was what was part of that kind of work is what's necessary to have that. I think it may have been you who said that, knowing that it's not just a box on a checklist for a grant, that the work together is not just some sort of, this is okay, we'll get it done and we'll check the boxes, but that okay, this person really believes in this work and and I get how I can be part of it. I can't do everything. I can't do everything to support that person in Wyoming County, but let's do it. Let's sit down and listen to them. That's the kind of thing that to me really makes this work.
That opportunity to build trust and share leadership. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, it does work. Cool. So my name is Brianna Hickman. I'm with the Hub. I am the Community and Business Resilience Initiative Project Director, further known as CBRI because it's a mouthful. Stephanie kind of alluded to this earlier, but the big gist of our project too is we talked about the community capacity portion of that, which is not typically funded by EDA, but is an incredibly important piece of the CBRI project. But then there's also the entrepreneurship resources and development that we have through our partnerships, the brownfield site remediation, and really pulling all of these together. Our ultimate goal is to increase the climate resiliency in our community. So we're creating plans that really wrap all three of those together because we feel very strongly that each of those core components, that's what makes a strong plan, right? That's what makes a strong community. So continuing to further out that work. But when I'm thinking about like what makes me come back to this continuously, Josiah, we did not talk about this beforehand, but I think our answers are kind of similar. It's just and I'll say this at the Hub, we're not experts. Like Stephanie said this too. It's like we're not creating jobs necessarily, right? Like we're not the brownfields experts by any means, but being able to, we respect each other's work enough in this coalition and within our project to be able to lean on those partners for their support, their resources, their expertise, and be able to bring that into the communities themselves. We've got 16 communities that we're working in right now just through Accelerate. I think we have representatives from each of those communities, I think, if not in this room, but at the conference today. We're able to make those impacts in the communities and allow them to make those impacts because it is really community driven because of all of those partnerships and that respect for like that work that's happening there. But I think that's what I ultimately come back to is that we're not the experts, right? Like then we can lean on one another for that.
This is so exciting. You all are making the network scorecard come to life. Brady?
Good afternoon, everyone. Brady got a Center for Sustainable Minelands. I'm the director of this new center that was actually born out of the Act Now Coalition. And so part of the center's goals is to take some of these former minelands that have been abandoned or are no longer used and figure out innovative new economic development opportunities for these properties. And so I think, when I think about how Act Now works for me, we're in Morgantown, right? We're 2 hours away from everything down south. And as you all know, West Virginia is a gigantic state. It really has allowed us to have those inroads, to be able to come down here and work with folks like Coalfield and to work with folks like Generation West Virginia and to have those interactions, to have those conversations. Well, what do you all need down here? We have all the resources and all of the talent that's housed at WVU. We don't necessarily make it down this far south. And so by having the coalition now, having friends and teammates and members that we can talk to really helps us to deploy our resources and helps us to identify where those needs are and where we can help out. And so, it's been an absolute blessing to be able to work with these folks, to come down here, to engage the folks in Southern West Virginia, to identify these sites that need help, that don't have those resources, and be able to deploy them. So that would be what I would say.
Thank you.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. My name's Cassidy Riley. I'm the Senior Director of Conservation at Coalfield Development, and I've got like a really cheesy, corny answer to this. But the leadership group who put together the coalition somehow managed to gather all of the most likable people in West Virginia into this coalition. It's a great blessing to work with these folks, so incredibly intelligent and welcoming and all of the things. And so I think that's one of the main reasons we work so well together is we're all unified under that North Star goal. We're all headed in the same direction. We believe in the vision and the mission. And one thing that's really stood out to me, I've been going around talking about the coalition in a lot of different spaces. And one of the spaces I've discussed it in is at the Harvard Kennedy School's Reimagining the Economy project. They're really interested in what the Act Now Coalition has been able to do. And one of their main takeaways was this would not work in other places. Other organizations in other regions, they'd be like crabs in a barrel, dragging each other down. They'd snuff each other out, trying to reach all of these resources. And I think in that way, we've got this deep and rich connection because we do care about the future of this place and the people who live here. And I think also it works for us because we have such a deep and genuine care and about learning what the other organizations excel at. We've been able to use this as a lever to reach new grant and funding opportunities and to do things we never really dreamed imaginable because we've taken that time to learn so much about these other partner orgs. So it's been a real blessing in that way.
Thank you, Cassidy. So you see how this truly is all about the relationships, and that integrity and trust and follow through begets integrity, trust, and follow through. So I don't know if it can happen somewhere else, but it's operating on a higher level and knowing if you stumble or if you hurt somebody's feelings, you address that. And you work through it together based on care, these points you brought out. So now let's get to the juicy part. So what kinds of challenges have you bumped into and how did you navigate them? I mean, really, because that was all the sweetness and light part. So what happens when it gets gritty? We heard from the founding team a little bit. Tell us what's gotten gritty for you guys and how you dealt with it.
Yeah, so when you start to, you cast a huge net, right? Especially in this zone of renewables and what we're all trying to capture and all the data we're trying to collect, it just gets away from you. You start to lose it all. What's this person collected? So with this large swath of folks out there doing good work, it's just hard to capture all of it all the time. And that's one thing we're working on, just by getting in face to face more often now, throughout this thing, and just bring those relationships closer so that we can kind of keep up with each other about what each other are doing. Now we've got a larger problem too with just being a newish industry in the area. It's always a moving target. Technology moves. Policy moves, and the industry is always moving in and out. So that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially real close here in the future too.
Yes. So the external environment affects your internal environment.
I think for us, so we were not actually the original, and I may have to ask Alex or Brandon or somebody that was involved from the very beginning, but we were not the original group that was going to take on this project. I think it was Yeager Airport. At some point during the process of coming up with this grant and working with the coalition, they realized there were some FAA regulations maybe about owning property, whatever it was technically, that precluded them from being the ones that got the grant money. So this thing was already sort of in the planning stages, and the grant had an outline and was pretty well done by the time we were brought in. And I commend our board at the Charleston Area Alliance for kind of stepping up and seeing the possibilities of what we could do with this project. But when we came in, we were kind of, taking other people's work. And since that time, we've had a lot of turnover just with the people that we work with. And that's been a real challenge. Tracy Rowan with EDA is gone. Our civil engineer contact, Kai Wechter, he's gone. My boss at the Alliance, who was integral to this in the early days, is gone. Brandon's here, but he's changed roles a little bit. So there's a lot of moving parts. Who did I leave out? I've made a list. Yeager Airport, actually the original person who was working on it, the director of the airport, is gone. And we have as many of our partners, one sector of partnership is with our elected officials. That's changing. So that's been a real challenge. Sometimes I feel like a detective kind of going back and looking at the paperwork and trying to figure out, like a forensic accountant, like, what was the intent of this? What do we actually have to do? And sometimes, frankly, things have changed where one person with an agency may tell you one thing, 6 months later, they're replaced and the story's totally different. So your plans have kind of gone up in smoke. So that's been a real challenge. The timeline's been a little bit difficult. So this facility that we bought, it was the old Kanawha manufacturing plant. And when we bought it, Kanawha Manufacturing was still manufacturing. And in fact, they had an industrial tenant called Power Parts. And part of the deal of us being able to acquire the property, which the Alliance took out a loan to purchase this property and the building, was to allow them to work there for another year, essentially, maybe a little bit more than a year. So we didn't really get our engineers in there and all the nooks and crannies until they were out. So we were well into it. So we have timeline challenges as well. All of these are really project-related challenges and not really challenges related to the coalition. So I kind of maybe sidestepped your question, but
That's okay. It all feeds together, doesn't it?
I'll just say the newness of the work, the industries that we're looking to activate or engage or inject a workforce into or activity into or investment into. And the tension that creates, because we're training people and we have these different models of training, and some are longer than others, some are more expensive, some are more intensive, but they all fit different scenarios, and we're trying to implement the right ones. We're trying to pick the right tools for the right jobs and the right industries. And when we are asking ourselves, okay, are we going to have jobs at the end of these trainings? Or is the goal just to get certifications? Are we building up just a base that eventually then will be able to have those jobs because it'll attract some of those industry partners? And can we float that for long enough? But then there are real people attached to those numbers, not just, numbers, but the people who need jobs, people who have families. So that tension, I think, has been a defining tension for the workforce component of it for us. And trying to pick the right tools and make sure we're doing it the right way. And in all of that, it just strikes me that we're just learning a lot, that all this is just very new. And so we're very much in a new world. At least for myself, it feels that way. It's like we're building these new things. And it makes me think a lot about our trainees and crew members who are just going through all kinds of also new experiential learning. That's what Coalfield's sort of based on, is just get in there, start doing and learning and pushing yourself. And so it's given me a lot of empathy for the deep changes and uncertainties and newness of just learning and growing. And I think the way of overcoming that, the way of meeting those challenges, is just the same way that we've seen for our trainees and crew members, that in that uncomfortability and consequences of your actions and choices, and, are you doing the right thing? Was this a mistake? Was this a misstep? How do we adjust? How do we keep going? How do we do the smart thing, the wise thing? In all of that, having a support system, having really good leaders who are really attentive, who pay attention, who are wise. I think that's what's Marilyn, my boss, helping me to know, yep, you can jump in here. Get to work, get doing it. We'll help you figure it out. And that's just what's necessary, and that it's possible to figure out those new things and those big, big questions.
Yeah. So I think when I'm thinking of just challenges in general with Coalition or CBRI, one of the things I think of is how we've worked alongside a lot of our partners historically, but not necessarily like built into a grant like we are right now, which has made a big difference. So even looking at previous hub coaching programs, we haven't typically had, we have 5 sub-recipients built into the CBRI project, and that's not typically how the coaching work happens, right? So going into that even initially, and it's like, all right, how do we make sure that all of our partners are also getting in on these, just these community conversations, these meetings, these connections. And honestly, what we did deep dives into our own work and shared that with one another. So we actually had that better understanding of where are you coming from? What's your expertise in this, so we can lean on you when that time's appropriate. And that way, when a community member says, oh, we've got this, we have someone who's very interested in starting a business, we know immediately, hey, we need to get you with the Fannin Valley or the West Virginia Hive, or when it's, one of our key partners is with the Brownfields Assistance Centers, both at WVU and Marshall. And so someone says, we've had this historic property, but it's been, just sitting here for decades and we don't know what to do. And it's like, George Carrico and Carrie Staten would be very happy. I'm saying right now, it's like, you need phase one. Let's get you in contact with the Brownfields Assistance Centers. But it's because of that relationship and those trusts, because we did those deep dives initially and really actually have that, I'll say, basic understanding of each other's work, right? And that leads to the respect. We've also tried to do that on the coalition level too. So as part of the CBRI project, we've done kind of deep dives into each of the coalition projects to get that better understanding, so that when we were talking with Brady's team, was it last month? Time is meaningless anymore. Sometime.
Yeah, last month.
But talking to him more about the Minelands mapping tool that they're using, and knowing that we've got 16 communities all across Southern West Virginia. How can we utilize this mapping resource so that when we've got a community who's saying, it's like, oh, we're looking at, development and what does this look like? And it's like, all right, we've got an expert here. Let's get you connected. And what does that look like? So really being able to learn what our partners' work is, respecting that partner's work too. Again, I think I'm coming back to this same thing. I think all the time, that we're just not experts in everything, and we recognize that, and we're okay with that. So leaning on our partners, for them to be experts in their field and to make that a sound collaboration and partnership, I think. So the challenge, but leads to that really strong work, I think.
Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. So I guess, talking about challenges associated with the work task that we're doing, West Virginia has mined coal for the last 100 years, right? And so we're all in a period of transition. Some folks are slower to transition than others. So as we start to look at some of these new post-mining land uses, we're looking at things like solar, we're looking at things like wind, we're looking at things like hydro and those technologies. Well, there's still folks in West Virginia that don't really want to engage in those conversations. But you still need electrons, right? We still have to produce electricity. The demand is not going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, it's only going to continue to increase with the advent of AI and electric vehicles and everything else. So having those conversations, getting those folks to understand that, listen, we're still going to be an energy producer state. We're still going to be a leading state in the country for production. We transition from, those coal and oil and gas to potentially other stuff. And so working with these folks that have those relationships with some of the folks that are those decision makers, that are those regulators, that we can say, hey, we're working on this together. Come join us. Come work with us. Help us to make that transition. We've got folks that are here that are willing to give you the training. We've got folks that are here that are willing to help you and teach you the things that you need to learn. So it's not a bad thing. It's ingrained in us. I mean, my whole family was a bunch of coal miners. So, to make that leap to the next stage is difficult, but I feel like we've got the folks and we've got the expertise and the technology or the personnel in our coalition that can help make that happen. Does it happen overnight? No. We've got a 4-year project to do this for EDA. We're trying to cram probably 15 years of work in a 4-year project. And so while that can be maddening at times, it's also, I'm kind of glad we have it because it forces us to make those decisions. It forces us to have those conversations, and it forces us to kind of look ahead and stay on the cutting edge and stay out in front and understand what's coming next. So.
Yeah. And I'll also tack onto that to say, for some reason, it's incredibly hard to figure out who owns abandoned coal mine lands. What's up with that? The ramp up period to identifying landowners and thusly finding people in those communities to execute the scope of work is sometimes a great challenge. But when you really get the right people in those positions, it's so rewarding and so functional. So taking that extra step to invest the extra time and added time to finding the right people in the communities where the work is being done, I think has been such a critical piece of this. The other thing at a deeper level, I think the challenge of all of this, the Act Now Coalition has really pushed us to scale projects in shiny new industries that hadn't really been touched. And in that, it required all of us to be bold in a way that we couldn't have anticipated beforehand. And I think we're all so much better off for it. I think the state's better off for it. But it really shows what grit in the face of adversity can really do when we apply ourselves as a coalition.
Oh, Cassidy, thank you. And thank you all for that. So I'm going to transition us now. If you remember that stages of development, the last one was transforming. And as the group has said, they're halfway through, like right now this month, of a 4-year funded position. So then the conversation becomes, who are we? Are we going to continue beyond this funded period? Do we have the momentum to do that? Do we have the interest to do that? What would we look like? So already before they're even halfway through, we're coming to this, who are we now and still? So I want to ask a panel, knowing that you're talking to a room full of people that are interested in this concept of network development, because probably they've got one up their sleeve they want to start. What one piece of advice would you share with them, a takeaway or a lesson learned that you want to share that will help them in their building journey?
Well, coalitions can work, and large coalitions can work, and there's strength in numbers that way. We're showing that. We're able to jump into these communities and adapt. We're able to reach out to our partners and know what those communities' needs are and do it quickly and rapidly. That just cements a network for future collaboration that we're going to need beyond these next 2 years. It's going to have to continue. We got to keep doing the work, and just being able to adapt. And we're setting a model really for future coalitions, and people can look to us and see that model, and we should be able to help future coalitions model that.
Thank you, Cody.
Yeah, mine's going to be pretty short. I think, based on what I just told you too, I think the team that you started out with and the partners you started out with are not going to be the same ones that you have today, and they're not going to be the same that you're going to have tomorrow. So I think that requires you to focus on those principles of collaboration. It's a true network. I mean, that's the best thing about a network. A piece can go out and it continues to work, like a blood supply or something. And I think that that's probably the best thing that I've taken away from this.
Thank you, Drew.
I mentioned the experiential learning model and cycle, and I wrote it down here. You could start at any point along this cycle, but to feel or experience, to watch or reflect or observe, to think, to generalize, to turn something into the abstract, and then to experiment or to do. That cycle goes on and on and on. And what I guess my takeaway would be is we're in that cycle as a coalition, as individual people, even it feels like to me as a state. It feels like we are in a big learning moment of this is a new sort of time, and that requires this sort of feeling and doing while also learning from that and then going through that cycle. And what's helped Coalfield to help people through that process as they come on with us and they're thrown into a new job, they're thrown into a new career that's maybe above their experience level. And that's the point, is that you can learn and grow and you can evolve and you can change. It's asking people of a lot of them, a lot of trust, a lot of risk is involved in all that. It's a beautiful process. But I think just us all having that same level of courage is my takeaway. It's kind of pushes me to be like, I'm in over my head. We as a state feel a little in over our heads, we as a coalition, but that feels like a right place to be when the proper trust and system is in place. And one thing that I think helps me think about how Coalfield creates that kind of environment for our people is our logo is a blue sky, a triangle, a blue delta, a brown delta, symbol for change. Brandon likes deltas. I've grown to like deltas as well, so thank you. Brown, tangible, grounded, reality, concrete things actually happening, things you can touch and feel and see. And then the red is the friction, the bold action, the change. And that's necessary and hard, but it makes it a lot easier when you have both of those other components where people can feel some grounded, tangible reality, and they also have a blue sky. And I think any project where it's asking people to grow, especially as a group, and change and experience this kind of deep learning, that would help to have an element of that, the blue sky, the tangibility, and also naming and acknowledging this is hard, but it's worth it.
Thank you, Josiah.
I'll be honest, I don't know what the Hubs logo means, so I'm sorry. I don't know. But one of my big takeaways and what I would encourage folks who are thinking of starting their own network or own coalition, community group, whatever that might be, have the conversations with your potential partners, with your partners already in existence, learn from them, ask them questions, be honest, right? Like I think we're all here, we're authentic with one another. And that's why I think we as a coalition work so well, because when we have questions, we'll just go and ask, I don't understand this. Can you please tell me like, what is the ultimate goal of this piece of the project? Or if we're looking for connections in the community, it's like, all right, we don't have anyone here who has someone who might be able to get us in here with that. But just that authenticity. And even I'm seeing now from our CBRI team perspective, we've been able to, I think, have, we'll say difficult conversations, but just being able to talk to one another about where we are metrics wise, right? We said that we're 2 years into the grant at this point, and we just had a meeting just a few weeks ago, and we were able to have a genuine, honest conversation about where we are as a project and what help we need from one another in an honest way. So not in a way that's, oh, well, yeah, if you share this on social media, that'll help us or whatever, but genuinely, how do we help one another reach our goals within this project? But then overarchingly, I think that goes into the work as a whole, not just within this project. So I really just can't emphasize enough to have those honest conversations with your partners, with your potential partners, whoever you're thinking about maybe starting that partnership with, and just really learn from them so you have that better understanding. And I think just building that trust, that's what it all comes down to. And you just build respect with that at the same time.
I agree. I'm looking at this graphic over my right shoulder here and seeing the interaction with all of the 8 projects and how the curves go in and out. And so, credit to Alex and Stephanie and Brandon for when they first kind of dreamed up this coalition and having that goal that everybody could shoot towards, right? We're not all going helter-skelter. It's not a shotgun approach. I mean, we're all ducks walking in a row headed in the same direction, right? But what makes our coalition so strong is that we have all that interaction. There's a number of touch points in each of our projects that force us, that allow us to continue lovingly force us to continue to work together. And so, after this coalition or after the 4 years is over and this project comes to an end, I don't see this coalition stopping anytime soon. I think it's on to the next big thing. I think it's, we only continue to grow and we only continue to develop additional relationships with new organizations that want to come on and jump in and help with some of this work because, we're just getting started. I really believe we're just getting started. And so, I'm always one of those guys that always likes to think, well, what am I going to be doing this time next year? What am I going 5 years from now or 10 years from now? And so when I think about the coalition 5 years from now, coalition is still here. We're not going anywhere, right? But now we have more work to do. We have more projects we can focus on. We have more relationships we can build. So to me, the foundation that Brandon, Stephanie, and Alex built is going to pay dividends well into the future.
Thanks, Brady.
I'm not sucking up. I'm just saying that anyway.
I heard a quote this past year that's really stuck with me, and it's that economic development is about bringing jobs to people, but workforce development is about bringing people to jobs. And whatever your goal is, it's going to require the intersection of both. In rural America, in climate change, whatever your goal is, it's going to require creative thinking about both of those. And I think that's what this coalition exemplifies in its core and its values, is that we're thinking about the people and the place. And we're thinking about how do we use the momentum of this coalition to really meet people where they are. And that's the sustainability of the coalition, is the community first approach. And I think that's been the biggest lesson for me. And watching everybody else on this stage and in the coalition walk that walk and talk the talk has been, one of the most incredibly rewarding experiences of it all.
Thank you, Cassidy. We talked so much about the human aspect of the work, and it brings me great joy because sometimes economic development can be a hard science or a hard pathway. I remember being brought into economic development to bring the human side into it as an educator. And that was like a brick wall when that invitation was accepted by me. But things change. There are two ways that I think the Act Now Coalition, I know the Act Now Coalition has made investments that I believe have made a big, big difference. I can't speak to the detail, but they purchased nationally recognized professional support in metrics, data, building the database. And Brandon, I'm looking at you because you may want to talk a little bit more about this. And then also an investment in a national, professional, recognized sustainability outfit that searches for and finds funds.
Yeah, so just some mechanics. I mean, the leads of each of the 8 projects meet once a week, every single Thursday morning. We have a metrics dashboard. So we hired BDO, which is the national firm, to create a dashboard to track the data and to make sure, are we on track or are we not? We have very honest and hard conversations about that, is loving conversations about that. And to the point of, I mean, it is a lot of money. It's spread across 21 counties, 8 projects, and nearly 30 organizations. And so how do we sustain the momentum? And that requires additional leveraging. And so we have a resource committee with the national consultant to help continue working on that. We have marketing communications team. And so it really, that first image of all the different dots and all the different connections, it just keeps going and going and going.
Thank you. So I wish all of you the very best in your new building, or maybe you're in the middle of the cycle. And I'm just so deeply grateful for all of you. And it's an honor and a privilege to work beside you. Thank you so much.